Greetings, everyone. Good evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you happen to be right now. Now, in this demonstration, what I'm going to do is I'm going to illustrate some basic Ruby coding techniques. Now, I'm assuming, for the sake of argument here, that you have no Ruby coding experience. So if you have zero Ruby coding experience and you want the first 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of how to start coding in Ruby, this is going to be for you. So I'm going to go over the very basics of Ruby coding. So basically what I'm going to do is 6 different things. We're going to go over writing out to system out of the console, a little bit more about output, about putting in like special characters like carriage return and line feeds. We're going to cover putting input or bringing input into a Ruby program with standard in. We're going to write and call a function. We are going to declare and assign a variable, and we're going to talk about variable assignment and casting, and then we're going to cover a very simple if statement. Now, if this sounds not exciting to you, you probably should be looking for a more advanced Ruby sort of demonstration, but for the sake of what we're doing, I'm assuming, again, that you are a newbie and you wanted to do Ruby, so let's get started. So this is what I am doing, and this is the IDE I'm going to use. I use Coding Ground. It's off of Tutorials Point, and it's basically an IDE for just about any language that you could imagine. Now, we've talked about Coding Ground a little bit previously, so if you're not up to speed on Coding Ground, it's worth looking into, because in Coding Ground, you can practice and learn just about any scripting language or any 3rd or 4th generation language. It's free, no credit card needed. So if you're not on Coding Ground, get on Coding Ground, get on board. You're also going to see on the right-hand side, again, I apologize because I got the free version of this, or pardon me, since it is free, I'm getting some of the ads there. I blocked most of them. I won't go over how to block them in Chrome. You guys can figure that out. So anyway, let's get started with an example here. Now, I'm not going to go over really too much the history of Ruby, what Ruby is for, and pardon me, the differences between Ruby and Java or Ruby and Python, but Ruby is a very highly used scripting language. It's probably about as popular as currently as like Python or any of the JavaScript languages. So what we're going to do is I just have here, if you take a look at what I have here in my IDEs, I have some commented code out. So I'm going to uncomment it and just kind of go over just some Ruby basics. And again, my goal here for you is at the end of this video, after 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so of demonstration, you will have what you need to get started with Ruby. Now, if you have experience with another language, this is going to be really quick because you're just going to look at this and say, oh, okay, well, how do I learn the syntax for collections such as arrays, or how do I pass parameters to functions? How do I get return values? And if you're just learning and you don't have any experience writing in a different language, so you have a little bit more to learn, but this will get you up and going. So let's start with the basics. What you do have is in Ruby, or in most scripting languages, you have what's called standard in and standard out. Now, standard in is really an input that goes into the program. Now, standard in can be a keyboard where you can type something in. It can be a command line argument that you're passing it. It can be a file. There's various different things and different ways that you can define exactly what the standard in and the default standard in is for a program. Now, also, you have what's called standard out. So you see std in, a little more on that later, and you also have std out, standard in, standard out. Now, standard out is the standard output stream, or what does the program write to. Now, by default, usually, Ruby, Python, and Java, standard in is usually the command line, or here, like in Coding Ground, you put like a variable, or pardon me, a value and standard in the put into the program. And standard out is almost always the console result, which you see here if you see my mouse in the upper right-hand side. That's standard out. Now, Standard in and standard out, like I mentioned before, can be configured, where standard out doesn't necessarily have to be to the console. It could be to a file, it could be to another stream, it could be to a socket. Again, this is alpha geek stuff, but when you see something like puts, what puts does here is puts is a command that we can use, a simple command that we use just to write something to standard out. Now, why am I going through all these hoops, you say? I mean, you're looking at this. You're like, okay, Bob, we're looking at line 2. It says puts hello world. That's going to probably write hello world to the console. Okay, I could have said that. We could have been done with it. But I'm trying to add a little bit more background about standard in and standard out. And so what puts does is it writes to the default standard out, which in this case is going to be our console, which you'll see in results here. So there's more to this puts than you actually think. If you wanted to write out to an output stream or to a file, there are ways of doing that in Ruby. We're not going to cover them here. We're just going to go over puts, which is taking something and writing it to standard out. So I'm going to click on execute, and our program is going to run as advertised after I uncomment it. So we're going to wait for Coding Ground to compile our program. And again, I'm not going to cover the internals of Ruby. We're not going to talk about compiled code versus interpreted code. We're not going to talk about bytecode. We're not going to talk about any of that right now. Okay, we're not doing that right here. Let's just get something in Ruby to work. Okay, there we go. So we got hello world. So puts writes to the default, pardon me, Bob, slow down, standard out. In this case, we get hello world. So let me comment that out. So let's go over some more output here. We have some more here. We have puts, which you just saw there, which writes to the screen. Again, doesn't have to be to the screen. We can redirect it. In most cases, it's the screen. I might be splitting hairs. Some of you might point that out, that it's almost always the screen, and I would digress and say it's not always. It's the standard out device, or the standard out, device. Print, what print does is it'll take the code, the string that we put in there, and it will write without a carriage return. Now, the carriage return, again, is basically like a line feed. Now, you don't necessarily know about this if you're a beginner. Okay, if you're a beginner, everything's a printable character, right? We got hello world here. We ran this program, puts hello world. Then what happened is when we ran this, I'm going to run this again. What it does is it takes this string, right, and it puts it or writes it to standard out, which in this case is our screen. Okay, not so fast. We have what are called printable and non-printable characters. Okay, if you're new, you don't know what a non-printable character is. You're like, well, why in the world would I have a character that I don't want to print? They're everywhere. They're everywhere, Mr. Newbie. For example, if you wanted to put in a tab character, or you wanted to put in a carriage return, which is the enter key, and if you wanted to put in a line feed, those are unprintable characters. Carriage return, line feeds, tab characters. There's also some other ones as well. So what print does is print just takes the string and writes the string out and doesn't give you a carriage return. So like if I, for example, did this, if I did puts, and let me do another one here. I'll do puts, and puts. Now watch this. If I do a run or execute this Ruby program, I get hello world, hello world, hello world. So we'll wait for it to run. It's running a little bit slow. If you were the internet and we're running all these Ruby programs, you'd be slow too. So you look at the output here, and I know what you're saying. You're saying, Bob, this is what we said it would do. Yes, it is, but let's look at this more closely. What this is doing is it's writing or puts hello world, and then it gives us a carriage control line feed. Goes to the next line. Carriage control line feed. Goes to the next line. This is a big deal because you look at this, you're like, well, I just said for it to say hello world 3 times and it did that. Well, carriage returns and line feeds aren't always by default. Like, for example, if you did some other commands, you wouldn't get them. Just kind of comment these out. and go down to here where we got, again, we got puts. We put puts works. And we're going to have some code that's going to run predictably here. So we have puts works, and we see that there, right? Works. Good. So then I put in another put statement, puts with line breaks. So then I do a execute. I execute my program, and I get my space, and I get my line breaks. Now, let's try another command that's going to write to standard out. So if I do, rather than put, I do a print. And let me just run, execute the print. So again, you look at this and say, Bob, this works exactly like puts, but watch this. If I do another print, if I do 2 prints in a row, and I'm running. Now look at this, no line breaks. So why did this work like this? Is this broken? No. It's exactly what we asked to do. What print does is print doesn't put in a control, it doesn't do a carriage return or a control line feed. So just remember, folks, beginners, that there are such things as non-printable characters. And in non-printable characters, they are of consequence in Ruby. You could define exactly what you want as like puts will automatically put the carriage return in there, print will not. Also, you can do some formatting too. Now, again, we got a couple things here because we got the NN, which is the line break. Actually, it's a line feed. Control R is a carriage return, and Control N is a line feed. So we're going to have 2 line feeds. We're going to say these are special characters. Again, you see the special character or the non-printable character by the backslash, right? Those are backslashes. By the backslash. So \n means 2 non-printable characters, in this case carriage returns or line breaks. It's going to say printf formats, and then we're going to put in specific string formats. And then what I'm doing is I'm appending a number, then appending a string to the printf function. Now, what does this mean to you? It's kind of an academic line of code. I'll give you that. But what I'm showing you here is with the printf is we could do a format print. That's what the F is. It's for formatting. So if you wanted to format different strings, for example, or format different numbers, again, we have pi here, and we wanted to put in non-printable characters, we could use this printf. Now, you've seen this before. If you've done other languages where you do arithmetic and to answer, you want to compute a raise percentage. So you take $10 an hour times a raise percentage of 0.031653, whatever, for a 3 point whatever percent raise. And then you get your raise would be, after your raise percent, you go from $10 an hour to $10.75.367325. Well, what you can do is in Ruby is you could use printf to format that, to give it to have it to 2 decimals or with currency signs. Look it up. If again, this is just a short video. If you want to format your output, use the printf statement. So let me execute, and we should see here printf. See, we got those 2 lines in there, right? Those 2 lines are from these 2 line feeds or line breaks. So right here. You don't see them. Now you see them. Now you don't, right? And then you got printf formats numbers like, and we got 3.14, which is this being formatted. Look formats up. That's all we're talking about here. That's the subject for another video for formatting, but you can do it. You could do it with a printf. All right, let's go over another example. Let's read from standard in. We already talked about standard in and standard out. Standard in Coding Ground is on this tab here. This kind of simulates a command line argument. If you were running this from a command line, let's just use PowerShell, all right, or DOS, right? You would execute your program and pass this in to the program in the command line. And it's called, a standard in argument. Standard in meaning it's the standard input device. Now, again, I might be splitting hairs here, and I might be over-explaining it. The reason I do that is because this is something that you always take for granted, what standard in and standard out is, because you're used to putting passing parameters into a program, right, by passing it as a command line and then writing out to the console and looking at what the results are. Well, those are the default standard ins and standard outs. That's configurable. So I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. Pardon me for the bad analogy. But here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put what's your name, and then I'm going to declare a variable called name, and I'm doing gets. What gets will do is it will take the next standard in argument, or pardon me, the next standard in parameter, and it will put it in a variable which I have here called name. So I have puts hi name. So this is how you get values going into your program. Very important, right? You might need to pass something in, like a raise percentage, a salary, a customer number, or whatever. So that's how you would do it if you're using standard in. So if I run this, I should get what is your name, and it should say hi Bob, right? If you look at standard in, I assure you standard in says Bob. So I click on execute. What is your name? Hi, Bob. Excellent. All right. So that is standard in. So we did standard out, standard in. We went over carriage return, line feed, unprintable characters. We went over formatting a little bit. Let's define and call a function. Now this looks a lot like Python. So if I do there we go. I'm doing a define, and what I'm doing is I'm defining a function. Pardon me, I'm just going to close this. If you see things pop up, just ignore them. Again, there we go. So you got mail, right? So here I'm building a function definition. It's got one parameter called name, and then I'm just going to put out howdy, and then I'm putting in the interpolation, which is basically the open brace and the close brace, and I'm putting in the name of the variable, and then end. This is my function right here. Notice a few things, right? Notice a few things here. Notice that I'm not defining, at least for this, I'm not defining a return value for my function. Functions don't need to have return values in Ruby. Also notice that I'm only passing in one parameter into this function, and I'm not defining what the data type is. Now, data types in Python in Ruby work very similar to Python. And I'm sorry if I get those mixed up, but I've been doing Python until about an hour ago. So if I slip to that, it's like speaking Spanish all day and then going into Portuguese, and sometimes your languages get all screwed up. It's just like that. Data types in Ruby are implicit. Again, what happens is they're really pointers to the data type, and casting is going to become an issue in some cases. Like casting means if you want to take a string and put it into a float or a number, if you're doing arithmetic or getting standard in. Now again, that's another video for, it's still kind of an introductory topic, but don't worry about that for now. Just know that if you're bringing something in, a value, and then you want to do some math with it, you may have to do some casting or doing some explicit data typing, but not anymore on that now. For now, it's going to take a string. So if I say welcome, I'm going to put in Bob. That's me, right? And I run by an execute. Wait for it. You get howdy Bob. Okay, all I'm doing here is I'm calling this function. Now, generally, functions are going to be before you call them. So let me just take this code here. And again, you guys are just watching this, or you could be going along with it too. No, I take that back. If you guys want, I encourage you, if you haven't already, to stop the video and try this for yourself. So let's try this. So let's run this, and we're going to have a problem because I'm calling a function before I define it. So you're going to see that error message too. So make sure that you define your function before you call it, and nobody gets hurt. Okay, let's talk about this deal with data types. Go down here. Now with data types here, I got a data type called bat. So I'm going to take this, put bat, I'm going to put in a puts bat. Actually, I don't need this. Actually, I'm kind of mixing my syntaxes up here slightly. Don't panic. All right, so here I'm putting in a string to bat. And when I run, we should get the value for bat on the right-hand side. I'm not getting it here. Let's try something else here. Get rid of this. Try it one more time. There we go. Sorry about that. So I'm printing out the string. Now also I can put in there, in this case I could put in a floating point or a decimal number. So I get 1.23, but let me do something. Let me add 1 to that. So bat equals 1.23 plus 1. So my simple arithmetic works. So I can do things such as arithmetic, and the casting generally takes care of itself for the most part. There we go. Now again, that's not always true. Just keep that in mind. But for now, you're just starting, right? You're only 10 minutes into your Ruby career. That's how you declare a variable and assign it into arithmetic. Now quotes, again, we talked a little bit about how that works. Like for example here, we got, like I'm going to uncomment this. Double quotes is just a string that we're assigning. In this case, name equals Mike. So here what we're going to do is we're just going to print out hi, and this is called interpolation. It's a concept what you see with the brackets. So basically what this is it's really kind of injection. It's kind of injecting name as part of the string here, kind of as some kind of dependency injection. So then what I get is when I run this, if you look at line 39 and do an execute, I should get a hi Mike, and this I should have a, there we go, hi Mike, there we go. So basically what this is doing is I'm putting in name as part of a string. Okay, now let's talk about those control characters again. Now here, this puts here, you've seen that one. At line 40, should have a comment. There we go. I'm doing hi, carriage return, which is a line feed, and then Mike. So I should have hi on one line, line feed, Mike on the next line. So let me execute that program. And, oh, Mike has to be, pardon me, the name has to be, there we go, uncommented, and we get hi Mike. Now, why do we got that space there? That space is there because we have this. We move that back, that space will disappear. Okay, now let me comment this out, uncomment line 41. We got this other puts where we got hi, carriage return, and Mike again. So in this case, since we're using a single quote, we're going to have the situation where no substitutions are going to be made. So let me just do an execute. And, I need to comment this out too. There we go. So you know what the code is and the comments are. Now take a look at this. Now when they got the single quote in here, the single quote doesn't take this \n as a carriage return. It does not. Oh no, it doesn't. It takes it as a literal. So you're going to have to play with your strings to get them working like they want. Let's do one last thing. Let's just do a simple if statement. Right? Now, Ruby, just like any other language, has flow of control statements. It has branching, like you see here. So if you wanted to do like a while loop or a for loop or a case statement or an if statement, Ruby has it. Just learn the syntax. And this is what we have here. I'm just putting in the income, in this case, equals, it's going to be a float, right? It's going to be equal to $30,000. And here I have income is less than 10,000. Going to declare a variable called rate equals 0.02. Else, if the income is less than 30,000, I'm going to have the rate equals 0.28. And again, I know this is hard-coded, but let's pretend like it's not. And then I have else, which means if none of these are true, the rate's going to be equal to 0.5. Then I'm going to put rate. Standard if statement. Again, it's just learning the syntax. Again, look this up. Google is your friend. There are a ton of online Ruby tutorials that are decent. Don't even buy a book. There's no reason to anymore. Seriously. I mean, even if people say, well, my employer will buy me a book. Why? Just tell your employer to save your money and buy you lunch, buy you a beer or something like that. Save your money for something fun. Because, like I said, there's so much stuff available online. And even 10 years ago, I would say a lot of the online stuff is crap, but not anymore. All right, so if I run this, I should get rate equals 0.5, right? Because the income is not less than 10,000. It is, what is it? Oh, it's not greater than 30,000. It is 30,000. So my rate should be 0.5. And again, I could use a printf if I wanted to format this. So if I run or execute my program, I get 0.5. There you have it, folks. That is Ruby in just really a few minutes. Again, my audience here, which is you, has no Ruby experience, right? That's what I was planning on. So now you do. So you should have enough now to get started with Ruby. Again, I didn't get into Ruby as a language compiled versus machine language. I didn't go over the uses for it and the idiosyncrasies. I just wanted to really concentrate on a quick syntax to get you up and going. So happy Rubying, and I bid you all a very nice rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.